Good afternoon. I've been a hospice nurse for over 20 years, and my goal today is to help all of you from the information that I have gotten and the experience that I have received from my patients and their families to hopefully make end-of-life discussions a little bit more palatable for everyone. As Ira Byock has said, you don't need to be dying for these conversations to matter. You need only to be mortal. It's hard to find hospice humor. But this is one. We're talking about how to get people prepared. We can prepare the fish. We're already talking about the fish. And we can prepare a turkey, as we all did last week. But preparing each other is a whole different ballgame. I think about the times that I've gone into patients' homes and they've asked me to take off my hospice badge because they don't want grandma or mom or whoever is dying to know that somebody is there from hospice. They don't want grandma to know that she's dying. And so, begrudgingly, I take off my badge and I go in and I sit down next to grandma, next to her, and I say, "So tell me, what's happening with you?" And 100% of the time, this person says, "I'm dying, but don't tell my family." We have a problem here. It's this discussion. And why is that? Are we trying to protect each other from something like lack of hope? It seems to come up a lot in hospice. Oh, I don't want to go to hospice. Then I wouldn't have any hope. And I ask, what is hope? What is hope to you? Is it hope that you're going to live forever? That's pretty realistic. Unrealistic as far as I know. And unless you know something that I don't know, I think everyone that you know and love is going to die. And so are you. And so am I. Preparing people for this conversation is something that we're uncomfortable with because it's the fear of the unknown. How is this going to go? We have a lot of barriers to the end-of-life conversation. One of them can be cultural. There are some cultures that feel if you talk about end-of-life, if you even think about having an advanced directive, that is really perpetuating death. It is really saying you are going to die, and because we are preparing for that, you're going to die even sooner now. We have religious barriers. We have family barriers. We even have physician barriers out there. People who go to their physician and say, "I'm done. You know, I'm done. I don't want to do anything more." And the physician, who is skilled in curative care, says, "But wait, there's one more thing. There's one more thing. Don't give up hope." And the family and the patient think, of course, I'm not going to give up hope. I'm going to try one more thing. And then we get the patients who do get a referral from their physician. And this patient goes into their physician on a Friday, and this person has been dying at home for a long time, really, but they put on their very best face. And they go to see this physician that they've really grown to love and respect. And they look the best that they have looked, with the most energy that they have had. And they go make a plea for hospice care. And they get hospice care. And they die the next, we go in, they die the next day. And on Monday, I get a call from the physician saying, "Gosh, that person looked great on Friday. What'd you do?" It's true. It does happen. It happens a lot. And so there is a miscommunication, I think, between what really happens in that relationship and what is really happening at home with that patient. So today, I want to talk about why we should have those conversations. Why? Why do we need more understanding? It's because one of the things that my patients and families have taught me is that when it comes to the end, if you don't know what their goals are, what their requests are, and they aren't able to speak for themselves, you aren't going to be able to give them what they wanted. If you don't ask, you're going to be making it up when they can't speak. So here's a good thing to do this Christmas. When everybody's together, have that conversation, but not pointed at anyone independently, but to talk to everyone as a group. Because we need to know whether a person wants pain medication, whether they want antibiotics, whether they want to be at home, whether they want to be in a hospital. Some people do. Some people don't want to be at home. Some people do want to be alone. Some people want their families there. But it gives everybody a chance, when you have the conversation, to say, hey, this is what I want, and to get it written down. A lot of you have probably heard of advanced directives, and some of you might even have them. But I want you clearly to remember from this, you can have an advanced directive that spells out exactly what you want. But if your family isn't on board, that is probably not going to happen. This is what happens. A person writes out their advanced directives with their hospice team or with another medical professional, and they have some family members that are there and know and understand what is going on. And then the person is dying and unable to speak for themselves. And the family pulls out the advanced directives. And someone else comes from out of town who feels guilty generally for not having been there, really no fault of their own. But they are wanting to show their love for this person who's dying. And what happens is, that person says, well, you're not just going to let Mom die, are you? And you can imagine what people feel like. This family, who's been there with the patient all this time and knows that Mom has been saying, hey, Uncle, I'm done. Let me have comfort. Let me have some peace. Let me die in my own home. And it's all in the name of love, what we do, what the family does. The family who's here, the family who comes in. It's all coming from love. But what happens when one person in the family is not on board with those advanced directives? What is going to be honored will be the person who asks for curative care. And that is what will happen. Although you may think your advanced directive is a legal document and that will save you, it will not. Hospitals and physicians are going to go with the decision of the family member that asks for curative care. So it's so important, not just to have advanced directives, but to get your whole family there and make sure that everybody is on board. And when I say on board, I don't mean that they agree with you, because everybody will have their own feelings about what they want, and what I want might not be what you want. But what is important is to say, will you honor my advanced directives? Will you honor that instead of your own desires over what you want for me? That's the question. Will you honor me? Will you do what I've asked because you know that that's what I want, even though it may not be what you want? And that's what I mean by being on board. It's a big discussion. And it's very important to have before you're old. I know we get together, we point at the person who's the oldest one in the family and think, your turn, let's get some advanced directives for you. And there you are, you're still feeling pretty healthy, thinking, if I cough, are you gonna cut me off? What's the deal here? So it's nice when families come together and you don't point it at one person. When you say, hey, let's get some information. And there is some good information. It'll be at the end of my slides, so you don't have to write it down. There's a great booklet by Hank Dunn called Hard Choices for Loving People. And what it does is tell you what the repercussions may be for the decisions you make at the end of life. It's not a slam dunk. Disease is different for everyone, and everyone is different with their disease. But it does give you some idea of what diseases particularly end up with infection taking them, and when is an antibiotic a comfort measure and when is it not a comfort measure. So that when you make out your advanced directives, you're not saying, oh, well, I don't want antibiotics, when really, if you have a urinary tract infection, it might be what you choose. It's not going to save your life necessarily then, but you would want that kind of information. Another way to stimulate those questions is to go online and look at the 5 wishes. That will stimulate the conversation for everyone. We have people in the newspaper, articles about people who were on life support in their 20s, and they weren't thinking about advanced directives. Families were pointing toward grandma, and it oftentimes is not just grandma. It's somebody in their 20s and 30s and 40s. We're not immune to it. You can get, disease is indiscriminate, really. It's a great idea for everybody to have at least discussed it with your family, those people who are going to make decisions with you, and that everybody is on board with really one thing, and that is to honor. So when we start the conversation at the end of life and someone already is dying, this is, grandma who says, don't tell, and family who says, don't tell, and we come in and we're kind of caught in the middle. Who's going to tell? And what are we going to do? And I hear this often being the plight of neighbors and friends who call me and say, I know that they're dying, but what am I going to say? What do I do? It's so uncomfortable. This is really no man's land here. I don't know what to say. So I'm going to give you some tips. The first thing is, listen. What you hear is going to be a lot more important than what you say. And start to be a bit comfortable with silence. In hospice, we talk about the 5 things that we try to help people take care of or talk about at the end of life. And when you go to see someone, whether they are a friend or a family member, thank you is one. It's the biggest one, I think. To say, thank you for our relationship. Thank you for what you've done for me. I'm reminded here of when I took my family on a vacation one year, and my oldest daughter had her 2 children playing in the play area for, it seemed like hours, waiting for this plane. And there were children circling the perimeter of those 2 kids playing, wanting to come in and play with their things and kind of feeling uncomfortable about it. And I heard my daughter go up to those other children and encourage them and guide them into play with her children with the same words I had used with her. And I thought, that lives on. That was something that was important. It seems that we are all here thinking about, on the earth, thinking about more money, a nicer car, a better place, more education. But I can tell you from the beds of the dying, nobody has ever told me that they wish they'd worked more overtime. Never. Never done it. They never wish for a better car, a bigger house, more money, or more education. There's one thing, clearly, that's spelled out at the end of life. People say, all my life, I was thinking about what to do to be loved. And now I feel like I have a split second to love. To love better, to love more. Now I see it. I had it all this time, and now I've got about this much time. So when you go to the bedside of that person and you're wondering what to say, getting thank you out there is very big. It gives you a chance, and it gives them a chance to put that thank you together. Second of all, we say, it's so important to say, I love you. And I'm proud to say, I'm kind of confident in saying that I think we're pretty good about I love you in our society. We say, I love you, goodbye. Thanks, I love you. We say I love you a lot. I don't know with how much meaning, or maybe it's just so ingrained in us that we feel free to just say it all the time. And you might say, well, they know that I love them. I don't need to say that. But after being with people 3 months later, after the death, 6 months later, a year later, what I hear is, I know that they know that I love them. I just wish I had said it. There's no harm in saying it again. thing is forgive me. And this is tough in our society, really tough. I mean, when somebody does you wrong and you say, geez, I'm sorry, what does that person say back to you? Do they say, I forgive you? Nada. They say, it's all right. Gloss over. It's all right. I forgive you is not really big in our society right now. But at the end of life, forgiveness is important. I grew up in Great Falls. My high school years were a little outrageous. I need some forgiveness from my parents and maybe the police, I'm not sure. But I know I need this. And although we have talked about it and I'm pretty sure I have that, I still want to hear it. I want to hear, I forgive you. Gosh, you're a terrible kid, but I forgive you. And because I know that part, and I have 4 children myself, it's important that I forgive them. So it's, I forgive you, you forgive me, and maybe even talk about some of those things that are unresolved, so that the slate is cleared. So we have, so far, thank you, I love you, please forgive me, and I forgive you. And the last is goodbye. To be able to really, from your heart, say to another person that you love, goodbye. It's a huge experience for the patient and for the family. To be there at the end when a loved one dies and to get to say goodbye is a wonderful spiritual experience and really not as hard as you would think. Be open. Keep the conversation happening. And hopefully, this year at Christmas, have that conversation with your loved one. That includes an end-of-life conversation where everybody gets on board with honor.